students, unless you have a resume, and I can maybe even make some notes on it. So those are two things that are really important. I don't know if you want me to go beyond about the kind of interaction I like, or is that going to be a separate section?
Yeah, we'll talk a little later about that. Okay. Definitely. Anybody else that want to talk about that, either Allie or Katie?
I can go next. I think it's important to, when you show up, that you've done your homework on the company, because you have a wide variety of sizes, whether you're looking for a large firm, medium firm, small firm, or whether it doesn't matter. Just make sure that you come prepared, because we're expecting you to do your homework on us as much as we've done on you by reviewing your resume or any type of, pre-contact that we've had with you. And just, like Terry said, show up prepared and look professional, because first impressions are always really, really important. And you don't want to be sized up by that. But, if you come in, because I have seen it in my history, I've seen people come in disheveled, looking like they just rolled out of bed. And that is never a good a preview that somebody wants to see in someone. So I think it's important to definitely present yourself in a professional manner. And also too, you don't want to waste someone's time, because if you've done the research with that company and maybe it doesn't align with what you're interested in, or the goals, or the maybe even the community involvement that they're in, and if you're not interested in that, then you don't want to waste your time on those, especially if you have 50 companies that will be there. Make sure you do your homework and look into those different companies and see whether they align with what you're looking for. So
I think that's a really good point that Allie just made too, because with accounting firms, I think typically, you're going to be, if you're going to be a CPA, you might be interested in an accounting firm. With banking, it's a little bit not as clear cut, I think, because there's so many career paths in banking. So oftentimes when I talk with students, their only idea or exposure to banking is on the retail side, where they go into a branch. They really don't have a good knowledge about even what commercial banking is. So I think the research part is really good. And don't just discount, just because it's a bank doesn't necessarily mean we're going to expect you to be a teller. There are other career paths. And so the research is really a good thing to have done on the front end to kind of identify that.
Excellent.
I echo all their thoughts. The only thing I was going to add to that was, on top of the research, obviously, there are lots of firms there, and you won't have time to go see them all. And just to echo what Allie said, make sure that you know where you want to go, so that you're not afraid to wait in those lines. If you know there's only 5 firms or banks or whoever that you want to speak to, make sure then you look at the lines, see where you can fit in, and go to those 5 instead of wasting your time at other places that might not really reflect what your interests are. So be efficient and know exactly where you want to go, so that you know that you can take the time to wait in a longer line if you need to.
Yeah, that's all really great advice, guys. Is there anything that you wish students knew about your companies that they don't come up or know already?
I can go first on this one.
Yeah.
We're a small firm, and I think that sometimes people assume, and especially, in the big world, we're competing with the big 4. I think that some of these students may assume that it's a better target to go to the big firms, but what they don't know about small firms is that we tend to offer more, because there's more cross-training in different fields, different industries, that type of thing, where I think sometimes people get pigeonholed. And I think with us, they get a broader view of what is out there. And then they can make that determination rather than starting with maybe a bigger firm. I think we offer the same kind of opportunities, if maybe not better, but I'm a little prejudiced. Like I said, I've been here a long time, and I've worked with our people for a long time, and I enjoy it, and I wouldn't be advocating for it. But I think, if you want a big firm, great, but just don't discount the smaller or medium firms also.
Yeah, that's great.
That is a good point.
Awesome. All righty. Well, we're going to move on here. I can definitely tell from all of this that we've talked about, research ahead of time is the big theme, is to know what you want and to be prepared ahead of time versus just walking in. So before we get away from this idea of what happens prior to going to the career fair, I also encourage you to utilize LinkedIn. So for example, you can put a post out there similar to the one I've got up here on the screen, talking about getting ready for accounting and finance, meet the recruiter. Tell people what you're out there doing. See if there's companies that people are recommending you talk to. The more active your LinkedIn profile, the better that you come off to a recruiter. And in addition to that, it also helps activate your own network to help provide suggestions for opportunities you may have not thought of before. So we're segueing a little bit into what the conversation is actually going to look like. So we've prepped ahead of time, and now we're going to talk about what it means to walk up and talk to an organization. We do call this a couple of things. Some people call it a 30-second pitch. Other times you hear it as this new term, the professional story. But essentially what this includes is talking points when you go up and talk to a recruiter. The first is the obvious, what your name, your major, your school, where you're attending. And then we're really segueing straight into our experience that relates to the position. And remember, we're looking at experience that's pretty broad. So it could be things that are former internships, but in all likelihood, if we're going after internship number one, it could be class projects, campus involvement, volunteer work, even thinking and reflecting on part-time or full-time work that you've held. And really, finally, we should have several handoff questions that allow us to have this back and forth conversation. We don't need to word vomit all over these people. We want to actually pull things back and to create a back and forth dialogue. And sometimes interactions are fast. It depends upon the length of the line that you may be standing in and how fast a recruiter needs to go through. But certainly they can last longer as well, depending upon, again, what the line looks like here. Professional stories, we talk about this relevancy and your experience that you're talking about. You may decide to use one experience versus another depending upon the firm that you walk up to. It's also important to think about creating those meaningful questions that come from the research. So asking a recruiter what they do is kind of a no-no on this end. What are you hiring for? That information has been provided to you in the app, and so you should not be asking those questions. In addition, we are really talking about fit within an organization at a career fair, so pay and benefits questions off the table at the beginning of this initial introduction of yourself. But there are good questions. You might decide to ask the type of projects that people are working on or how the day-to-day goes. Even maybe thinking about your own professional development and the training programs that could be available. My go-to question is the hiring process and the timeline. That's always good to know what they're looking at as an estimate, so you know when follow-ups are appropriate here. When it comes down to it, I'd love to hear from our recruiters, and certainly feel free to jump in, but a lot of the questions that surround our students are wanting to know this play-by-play of how this interaction actually unfolds. So when a student walks up to you, how does that typically, that play-by-play go out?
I'm afraid to jump in. I guess I'll start. I realize, and everybody that's involved in, should be, realize, anyone who's involved in recruiting realizes that, it's a step and that you're nervous and, you get the jitters and, and then we're dealing with accountants and finance, and some people are very introverted. We have to recognize that as well. And it's a big step to step outside that box and step outside of yourself and do that. But the more you practice it, the more you become it. And even if you practice with friends or, even relatives and just get out there so that it becomes more of a natural thing for you. And just ask those questions, because it's no different than if you're out on a Friday or Saturday night and you're out with friends and you're introducing yourself to new people. It doesn't matter. You're learning how to network regardless of whether it's personal or professional. So what I think to keep in mind is that to ask those questions, what are you interested in about? Because, like the recruiters that are there, you could even ask them, what made you go into an accounting, field? What made you aim towards this firm even, or into this job industry, because Terry, she's with a bank. What leans you towards this company versus others? I think that's always a good segue too, is what can you tell me about this? I'd love to hear more about it. So it leaves it open-ended, and then it engages in other things, and it can lead to other topics as well. So I think that's a good segue, but it can be hard for some people too. So recognizing that.
That's great.
Oh, for
Katie,
sure.
go ahead, Terry.
Go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, I totally agree with what Allie said, because it is, I mean, it doesn't matter what the situation is. It can be nerve-wracking if it's the first time of doing it. You don't really know what the protocols are or how to behave or what the appropriate things are. So in banking, for committee presentations, we rehearse those sometimes. We role play. So I think that was good advice that you gave. One of the other things that you had mentioned, Lauren, was your name, your school, whatever. I also always like to know when they're going to be graduating, because I am probably going to talk to them differently if they're like a senior getting ready to graduate versus if they're earlier in their college career and what they might be interested in. And one of the other things, or a couple of ideas, is always get the business card, because part of what you're there for is to make connections. And in business, it is all about connections. You know somebody who knows somebody who can get you in the door at whatever place. And if recruiters are there, they're always interested in developing relationships with potential talent. I'm not even in HR, and I recruit all the time just because there's turnover in my group, and I like to know people who I can call who might be able to fill that spot, and it makes it easier on me in the long run. So I would say also a question you might ask is, what is a potential career path? Because a lot of times when you're first out of college, you're going to be getting an entry-level type position, and that may not appeal to you so much exactly, but it may be the point that gets you to what your ideal job is. So asking about the career paths available from that entry-level position is probably something you want to explore as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Terry.
Another good talking point, when you come up to anyone in a career fair, just come up with confidence. Be confident in who you are and be yourself. Most firms and banks and industries, we're looking for humans. We want people, anyone that can interact. We don't want robots. So just be yourself. Everyone's nervous and anxious, and everyone wants a job. So we all understand that. So just being yourself kind of helps you relax and bring your natural and positive energy forward. Also, know who you're talking to, know who you're approaching. When a recruiter introduces themselves as a recruiter, you can kind of understand, okay, this is the recruiter, and you can say, well, I am really interested in audit or tax or whatever you're interested in. Can you lead me to a professional within that industry? So that you really want to know if you're talking to an executive, oh, that's great, because then you can adjust your questions to a longer career path. Whereas if it's a staff, you can talk more about the recruiting process, or someone just went through the process more earlier or just recently, rather than an executive it's been a couple of years. So you can kind of adjust your questions once you understand who you're speaking with.
That's fantastic. I really love that term, adjust the questions based on your audience there. Is there anything that makes a candidate stand out in that really short interaction that has impressed you in the past?
Well, exactly what Katie just said is, if I always remember more those candidates who are more, I don't know if I want to say determined or focused, but have more of a, I guess, focus on what they're trying to accomplish, or the confidence that they show, or, they know the protocols, shake your hand, ask for your card, those candidates always stand out more.
Yeah, I think it's the confidence in yourself and what you're providing and on your resume, and being able to reflect that as a human being and not just on piece of paper.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Thank you. I think you made a perfect segue too for us, because it really comes down to having this assertive versus maybe a passive way of approaching people. It's certainly the tone of voice and our physical presence, not only the way that we dress, but also are we slouching, our eyes darting multiple places, even the language we use. Maybe I feel that I'm good at this, or I think that I'm good at this, doesn't project the level of confidence that says I am good at this. So there's lots of factors that go into it. When it comes down to it, for most of us, it's maybe one or two of these that we have to focus on. So if you realize that the eye contact is a problem, then focus on one thing versus trying to tackle an entire list. I had mentioned, of course, the use of language, and it's interesting to know that weak speech habits really can diminish our professionalism and our confidence. So things using non-words, for example, the ums and the likes, or for example, uptalk when we might answer a statement that makes it sound like a question. So why am I always ending something like I'm not really sure? Speed talking is another issue, right? We have so much to say, so little time. How are we going to get it all out in one foul swoop? But really taking a step back and thinking, ooh, 2 beats in my head, and then I can answer, and take a breath. Sometimes we forget to talk or forget to breathe. And again, that weak speak there, I feel, perhaps, hopefully, those sorts of language in there can be problematic when we're trying to say, no, I am the best candidate for everyone. Terry, I think, had touched on this at the beginning. What really impresses, what do I wear? And it comes down to professional attire is the best. We want students to show up in suit and dress pants, a tie for gentlemen. Ladies, we have a little bit more flexibility, but we're still looking at either suit pants that we might be wearing. You could potentially do a skirt, make sure that the length of our skirt is coming down to at least our knees. And just be aware too of, you bought those brand new shoes or the heel height is a little bit taller than you would have expected. Be aware that you need to be comfortable. So if you haven't ever practiced walking in heels and you're going to decide to wear them to the fair, that's problematic potentially. If it flats makes you feel better, then you should wear those. So comfort within the parameters of professional, right? We're not coming in our jeans and t-shirts or PJ pants. Not that I would think you would come in that way. If you are looking for professional dress, on campus is Pa's Closet. It's over in Kavanaugh Hall in room 117, and they have professional dress. You can actually get a full suit and ties and any accessories that you might need, and that is one free outfit a month for students. So please go utilize this. There is absolutely no fee for it. You just got to show up with your ID card in order to get those. Or in order to get that. So really nice stuff there, but great examples on these two slides are these two pictures of what professionalism looks like. Also, what to bring. A Padfolio is always great, but if you don't have it, a notebook will suffice, something to write things down. You will be utilizing your phone, and I think all of the recruiters probably in the room can speak to this. We know that everything is on the apps nowadays. We don't hand out a printed copy of all of the employers and the positions they're hiring for. It's on our phones. So it's okay to have your phone out and to be utilizing that. Here in about 4 or 5 days, we're going to be uploading the map into the or into the app that you'll be able to see and know where all of the tables are located. And then obviously bring copies of your resume. My rule of thumb, 2 copies for every person or every company you plan to talk to, in case there's a couple of recruiters at the table, so you can hand those off there. So while this is a career fair prep webinar and not necessarily a resume critique webinar, I did want to ask the question, what makes a candidate's resume stand out to you? So they're in front of you physically and they're talking to you and you're looking through the resume. what are things that help stand out, or formatting, or anything like that?
Go ahead.
Obviously, every recruiter will look at a GPA, but also looking at the coursework and how you balanced, maybe, if you were involved in some sort of sport activity or club or even volunteer work, how you really pushed yourself and how you were able to balance those things out. Because it really shows, you overall, your personality, what you're interested in, whether it aligns with us, whether, because for instance, we do a lot of not-for-profit work. So if you guys, if we have a candidate who's very involved in the community, maybe it's something that would align with them. So those type of things, I just want to see whether maybe they put themselves even through school, because sometimes you have candidates out there that took more than the standard 4 years, and it took them maybe 5.5. And maybe it's because they changed their mind, on their major. And I think that's really important to note, is that, this is what I went through. This is kind of the story of me. And this is what I learned along the way. And just, I'm looking at that story because I want to know more about that. Otherwise I'll be asking. So, because, especially if you take 5 years, without somebody asking it, they will wonder. So I feel like that is really important to address.
Yeah, I agree with that. And particularly if there's a lower GPA, you're probably not going to be as competitive as some of the other candidates. So I'd be prepared with your story about why that is the case, or if it was, whatever the story is, I think you should be prepared to make the case about explaining it, because it will put you at a disadvantage with other candidates if you don't have a good explanation for it. It's interesting. I've seen recently a much different looking resume than I had previously. And in many cases, I'm getting resumes that have the picture of the person on it, which I had never seen that before. And then I've seen some where they've had like charts and graphs of how they spend their time. And I don't know if that's a new thing they're learning, or I don't know how it's come about, but someone's doing it because I've seen a lot of them that way. So that's interesting to me. And those stand out just because they're so different compared to what I've seen historically. So I don't know if that's in a good way or bad way yet. I'm not sure about that, but it's definitely interesting and captures your attention.
Yeah.
I echo all of them again, but I just to add to that, when a GPA is not listed, I see that as a red flag. So if you don't list your GPA, I agree with Terry explaining maybe why it's not on there. Maybe it's early in the school year and you're just waiting to see how classes go and you want to present a better GPA later on. That's totally fair, but I think it's better to have it on there than to not. Otherwise, I think it's easier for a recruiter or a client server to kind of look past it, because and we're kind of assuming the grades aren't there. And other things we like to see are leadership. Anytime that you can show that you've had leadership opportunities and implement and other things besides just classes, right? Also to add, because we have a lot of teamwork is involved in our jobs and a lot of communications involved in our jobs. So anytime that you can show that you've had leadership or followed leadership or took a lead on a project or a group, that's always great to show in any way. And that's also a good way to spark conversation. You might be able to connect with the person you're talking with on a different level because you were able to say that you were a part of a certain group. So you'll never know what kind of connections you can make when you bring those things to the table.
Exactly. And
we had an interesting question actually from the chat room. Someone was interested if we should stick with work and school information or if we should share any personal information. Would anyone like to take that question?
Personal information can be relevant, just like I said, you have
Sure.
personal interests, so it does not hurt to share, what those interests are, because they may align with someone else's. You may have something in common, even more so. It all comes down to company culture too. So those interests can be very important. If they're very different than where you wind up, at an employer. So I think it's important to discuss all of that. Basically, start off with the school and what you've done and your interests, but also your side interests are also important as well.
Yeah, I say just keep it keep it the most relevant. Whatever the most relevant information is, that's what we want to see. If you have leadership information from high school, but you have more personal information now that you want to share about yourself that's more relevant to today, you might have been out of high school 2 or 3 years now and it's not as relevant. So I would start removing some of those things that are now 2 or 3 years old that are really not relevant to what you're looking for now, because your interests change from high school to your sophomore or junior year of college. So I agree, just keep it relevant to who you are and what you're looking for.
And I agree with that too. But I think you can also think a little broader from the perspective of if you have a side interest that has taught you a particular skill that may be relevant to your conversation, but even though the hobby or whatever it is you're doing is not directly applicable, maybe you've learned a skill through that activity that would be applicable. So don't shortchange yourself.
That's really great advice. That's really great advice. So it sounds to me like a combination of the nice looking GPA, also the leadership skills and additional work experiences is really what creates a holistic candidate when it comes to what it changes makes a great candidate stand out.
Yes.
Awesome. I see head nods there. Very good. Very good. I'm curious because this question gets brought up a lot with our students. How do you use the resume after interacting with this candidate? So the student passes it over to you, the interaction is finished. They're curious, what happens after?
So I keep all of them. I mean, I keep them like forever. And so, because if it's somebody who I was interested in, but maybe not fit for me right now, I may go back to them at some point in time and consider them. But I also use them when I'm trying to evaluate them in a pool of people. I'm going to spread all the resumes over my desk, make sure the candidate that I'm looking for has the degree I want, the GPA I want, the skill set I want. So I do save them all.
We also save them all, but here's where the other aspect comes into place is because of those personal interests. Let's just say that something happens and this candidate isn't a hire for us, but we hold on to them, and then based on memory or the conversation that we've had with that person, we have a lot of clients. And sometimes our clients reach out to us and they say, oh, we're looking for someone. Have you heard anybody? We're looking for entry level, that type of thing. And then click, boom, here, that resume comes to mind, and we can pass that on to somebody else, and here's another opportunity. So it kind of feeds into other things. That's why networking is so important. That's why it's also important to know what those personal, making that contact and what those interests, are, so that let's just say somebody's interested in construction, or remodeling, that type, as a side gig. They did it, through college. They worked on the side. Well, we have a construction company that's looking for somebody, here it's a personal interest and it's in their educational background. So you never know. Never discount those.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, we keep them all too. Obviously, we not hard copy, but electronically, because it just gets to be too many. But that's the main thing that we look at for after your application. Once your application is submitted, you'll have to submit your resume again. So whether we get it at career fair or through the application process, we'll have your resume. So between the resume and transcripts, those are the two main things that we look at when making our hire decisions, initial hire decisions.
Excellent. Thank you all. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to segue us a little bit to what happens after we've prepped, we've got our resume together, we've practiced this pitch, we've researched, well, what happens at the day of the fair? So you will come to room 450 in the campus center, and you're going to check in with that crimson card. There's going to be a space for jackets. Funny enough, it's starting to get cool out, so you may have those. But in addition, if you've got backpacks or purses, there's space for those as well. You'll get checked in and you'll get a name tag. So that way, when employers are interacting with you, they're able to be reminded of who you are when you walk in. This is just a little sample of what that check-in desk will look like when you arrive. Just have that crimson card out so you're ready to go. And when you do walk into the fair, these are a couple of samples on what the room will look like. It's going to be laid out with lots of tables. The employers are going to have all kinds of pop-up banners and business cards and flyers that you might be able to have. I suggest when you first arrive, get yourself oriented, take a lap around the fair so you feel comfortable with where the companies are that you want to speak with. Also, again, refer to the map that's going to be located in the app here in the next couple of days. Sometimes the fair can be really loud, and that depends upon the number of people in the room. So be prepared to speak up when you're talking to employers. That way, when you're going to be remembered not as the person who's very soft-spoken, but the person that was able to project their voice there. It's worth noting too, when you are navigating this fair layout, there might be lines for some employers. And this is an opportunity to look at your list and say, you know what, there's somebody else that I can talk to, or I'm going to wait in this line because I have the time to do so. There can also be multiple recruiters at a table. Some organizations bring upwards of 2 or 3, as you can see in this one sample photo here. You might be talking to that many people. So again, it's nice to have multiple copies of the resume just in case. Most tables will have a minimum, of course, of 1 recruiter that you can expect to be speaking with you when you're there. So when we're talking about navigating the fair, we get this question a lot from our first-time career fair attendees. Do you have any tips for people who are first-time career fair goers that will make this experience easier for them or a little less stressful?
Terry?
She's itching to
respectful.
I know sometimes it can be really crowded and like a lot of people come at the same time, and so it can be overwhelming, exactly loud like you said. So I don't know that I have any good tips to share with regard to that.
Yeah.
I think just the main thing is just be prepared for it, understand what you're getting into, know who you want to talk to, and get the lay of the land and try to fit everyone in the amount of time that you're given. That's the best you can do. It's chaotic. It always will be. And just take it for what it is and enjoy it.
Well, and I think too that I think it's hard for students, when you see other students, going and they're hitting the pavement, trying to get the jobs and making the connections, and there's a little bit of FOMO, fear of missing out.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that it's very competitive out there, but I feel that it's really important to be authentic to yourself. Don't try and fit the mold of another company or what somebody else is doing. You are you. You're unique. Be yourself. Figure out what it is that you want and whether that ties to what your interests are, and go with it. And trust your gut.
Yeah, that's great advice, guys.
Yeah, I love that because you're interviewing the firm or the company just as we're interviewing you. So it's got to be both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I love to hear that because certainly it's a two-way street when we're talking about communicating what we have to offer and what then you guys have to offer, right, as companies. What about you guys? Do you ever get nervous when you go to a career fair? I'm thinking from the side of a recruiter. What does that feel like to you guys?
Yes. I mean, I get nervous. Well, probably in a different way than what students do, but students today are smart and sophisticated and accomplished already. Mm-hmm. And I'm always afraid maybe they're going to ask a question about my profession that I hadn't thought of or couldn't answer for them. So, it is a little bit nerve-wracking, probably more so from the standpoint of I want to be able to talk to everybody, and I hope I don't spend too much time with one person to the exclusion of other folks. And but it's out of my daily wheelhouse, and so it's something different. And you always get a little nervous about things like that, or at least I do.
Yeah. I think you just have to be comfortable in your own skin. And sometimes you are trying to be comfortable in your own skin in an uncomfortable situation, such as, an environment where it's very loud and and overpowering. So just, understanding yourself and taking those deep breaths. If you have to step out for a minute to take a deep breath and regain your composure and do something, then do it. But I'm usually pretty comfortable, but I've been through this a few times too, so it helps.
Yeah, practice makes perfect,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Practice it to become it. That's a great line. I read that somewhere, and I use it all the time.
I think just overall, there's always a little bit of anxiety going into knowing that you're going to be talking to so many people, and we want to do the best job to have good conversations with you all and also make sure that we remember you. So I think we can add a little anxiety on our end to make sure that we're tracking all of you appropriately and we do the best job we can. And I think we all do a really good job of doing that. So I don't think you have anything to worry about on that end, but just know we're human too and just as nervous as you are.
Great.
That's good to know, because I think a lot of us on the other side are thinking, oh my gosh, they're not nervous at all. I don't know how to have this interaction without stumbling through. But it's fantastic to hear that nerves are really on the both sides of the table, because we're all under pressure in a way too. Get the right candidate and have the great conversation. So it's good to hear that. Thank you. So this is another area that we get quite a few questions on, and that's the follow-up after the fair. So typically, you are going to be invited to submit an online application. And I think Allie or Terry had mentioned this, getting people's business cards so that way you follow up with these thank you emails. Again, they might be making decisions very fast. So in this regard, you need to send those thank you emails really pretty quickly. And connecting on LinkedIn, again, another great place to find yourself in the digital space, that you're able to interact with these people past the fair and ask them questions past this one interaction. But I did want to pass this over to you, our recruiters. What kind of follow-up do you usually like from a student? How does that interaction usually play out if they're sending emails or anything like that?
The thank you emails are always very nice and very much appreciated, and not everybody does that. In fact, less than 50%, I would say, do that. That's my experience, but I think it's very, very nice, and it does help set you apart. And the follow-up, it just depends. If it's something you're very interested in and you've been invited to connect or stay connected, then you should definitely take advantage of that, because like I said previously, in business, it's all about connections, and you never know how knowing one person is going to help you meet another person who's going to be, a life-changing person in your world. So how I say definitely take advantage of that and follow up as much as possible.
Yeah, I appreciate a thank you email. This might be more Big Four related, but I do not have the capacity to always respond to every email, but we do receive it and we appreciate it, but don't not receiving response back from us, don't get nervous about that. I think that's usually on my end is pretty typical, I think, in the Big Four, just because of the volume that we receive. I think the best follow-up is to apply online and apply correctly, follow all the instructions, read the job description, make sure you're qualified for what you're applying for and what you're interested in. And I think that's the best way to show your interest and desire and wanting to be a part of our firm.
I think it definitely helps build bridges, if you are reaching out and thanking them and, saying, yes, I really enjoyed meeting you, really like your company, or, feel like it, my interests are aligned with them or not, just so that we know from our standpoint whether it is something that you are interested in or not. Because if we don't hear from you, maybe that means, because sometimes, I hate to say it, but people make assumptions, they assume that maybe, we aren't, in your top list. So just making sure that you're trying to do the communication on your end as well. So it doesn't hurt it, because, you never know, it could circle back around down the road and you could be interested in that company, or you find out that somebody at that company, let's just say even 5 years down the road. I've connected with people years, ago from meetings with them. So just never discount that again.
Exactly.
Yeah, and if you email and have questions,
Mhm.
always respond if you have questions being asked. I think if you have follow-up questions, I think that's great and also shows more initiative.
Mhm.
And following up, not only with me as a recruiter, I think this is, again, a little more accounting specific, but I think following up with the client servers that you spoke to, because those are going to be the ones that are, at the end of the day, actually doing the hiring for us, and you'll be working with them one-on-one, whereas me as a recruiter, yes, I manage all of this, but you won't be working with me directly on the day-to-day.
Excellent. Excellent. And thank you so much about that follow-up. We do get, like I said, a lot of questions about that on how that interaction works. So certainly that helps provide some context for us. Well, we are actually nearing the end of our workshop here today. I did want to open it up on our chat if there were any questions that you'd like to ask the recruiters that we have time here, maybe in the last 10 minutes or so, as we start to wrap things up. And I'll give time for people to type in any questions they might have. In the meantime, too, I am available for questions, and my colleague Anjali Hampton-Brown will also be available too. So our emails are on that screen. Those of you who have been in the chat box today, Brian Doyle and Luke Keeper are going to be available for you as well if you would like to make appointments with them. They are doing resume reviews, cover letters, career fair prep, and interview prep. So we know a lot of those will be coming down the pipe for you here soon. Our grad intern as well, Aaliyah, will be doing that as well. So we'll just wait here to see if anybody has any additional questions that open up in the chat. But is there any last advice that maybe our group of panelists, we really appreciate your time, that would like to give out of some parting words of wisdom?
Well, I was going to give a shout out to your group because you guys you're connected with employers and you're always my first call when I need something. So I think students should definitely take advantage of all the things that your office is able to offer to them, because that's, again, where my first stop is going to be when I need something.
Awesome. That's great advice.
I agree with Terry. I think that IUPUI does a great job with the students and connecting them and really making them a priority and giving them the tools that they need. I'm impressed. There was a question about a GPA of 3.5.
Mm-hmm. I
don't know if you want to talk about that now or.
Yeah. So there was a question in here regarding leadership and work versus and that experience versus having a lower GPA of a 3.5, which I will just say that is not a low GPA. But it sounds like from our conversation on the resume section that it is a mix for you guys, right? A decent GPA, I think a 3.5.
I think
that.
just explaining the story, like
Yeah.
if you feel that you could have done better, then, put that in there, like what challenges you faced, or maybe, there are some family issues because everybody's dealing with something, so making sure that you point those things out, that I was able to overcome some of this, even though my GPA may have been lower than what my own expectation, or maybe you're thinking that the firm is expecting from someone. Again, just giving a little more piece about yourself, so that we understand more. We're human too. We face life challenges as well.
Yeah, I agree. I would rather see a 3.2 or 3.3 than with that someone that's doing a lot of different things, is involved in a lot of different things, has a lot of different experiences than a 4.0 student that's only focusing on school and the books. Yes. I think great. I mean, I think that's great that they can maintain a 4.0, but I'd rather see that you can manage time management and manage a schedule and be able to be involved with a lot of things and maintain a good GPA, and then also show that you have interest in other things as well and you can manage that time.
Yeah, it shows those life skills.
Yes.
Exactly. Yep.
Oh, here's an interesting question. If the interaction at the career fair doesn't go exactly as planned, what is the best way to bounce back, just in case?
Well, like anything, if you were to meet somebody, you're at a restaurant, you meet somebody and you feel that maybe they misinterpreted you, you can always go back and say, you know what, I just need a second of your time. I just need to clarify. no harm, no foul. If you're walking away feeling like something's awkward, then you have the right to go back and clarify it and just make your peace about it, or else you will be stewing about it for days, if not months, about that, going, did I make a bad call? So always, try and rectify that. And that's with anything, whether it's professional or personal, just make sure you go back and explain yourself. Nothing wrong with that.
That's really good advice.
So.
And you can, I think in person would be great if you did it that day and you're easy about it. But if you went home and you're laying in bed feeling uneasy about it, send someone an email. That's okay too.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good follow-up there, definitely. We had someone ask about if the career fair will help pre-Kelley students. And yes, if you're a student that has not been admitted into the Kelley school but is interested in programs such as summer leadership programs that might be hosted through some of our accounting firms, this is certainly the time to get yourself out there. I think I even, in the banking industry, Terry, you could probably speak to this. You guys are recruiting younger and younger, aren't we? Like how I know we're starting to get into the high schools at this point. So the sooner you get in front of a recruiter, I think the better off you are. Let me know if that changes.
I think that's good advice too. Because it also helps guide kind of your thought process. So you may be thinking you want to do whatever, and the more you learn about it, you're like, oh, I'm not sure I really want to do that. And then it may help prevent you from pursuing things that you're really not interested in as you learn more about it.
Yeah, nothing wrong with educating yourself earlier and getting your name out there earlier. As we see you coming through as a freshman now in the spring, you might be eligible for some opportunities. So, or freshman or sophomore year. So yeah, earlier the better.
Yep.
Awesome. Nothing like being prepared, coming in first couple of weeks of class, right, guys?
So early.
I know. I think there's a lot of interest too for the career fair. We've had a lot of good prep and good questions in here. So again, the chat is open, guys. If you want to answer any questions, I'll be happy to pose those here in the next couple of minutes. But again, remember to download that career fair app and make sure you have Simplicity Jobs and Careers on that phone. So someone had a question here. How do you start building your resume from scratch? Because all recruiters look for just a good resume already. So it sounds like they're looking for advice on the type of experiences you might be looking for on a resume.
I'd go to your career services and have them help you out. Sounds like they're a good stop in, and they can help you kind of tweak your resume, and they can help probe some questions out of you that you don't even realize that are good skills to be added on there. You've got more skills than you think, whether you think it's just from scratch. Like, it'll be a good resume, I promise.
And you have this great resource right there. Take advantage of that.
Yeah.
Very true. Very true. Any experiences that you think would stand out to you as ones that students maybe leave off often on resumes?
I mean, we tend to see a lot of the same things. So I guess if you have like a unique experience that you might feel uneasy sharing about, that might not be a bad idea to add. I know you all tend to do the same projects every year or be involved in some of the same things, which is great experience. But if you have something else that you're involved in that's not directly involved with every other IUPUI student, I think that's always good to add a little difference in yourself, whether it's a church group or a other volunteer group or other clubs that you're into outside of school. That's always kind of stands out as opposed to all the same clubs that everyone at IUPUI can get involved in, which are still good. Those are not bad. I don't want to involved in the clubs in school, please.
Even summer jobs, things you learn in summer jobs, or if you worked in high school or in the summer at college or whatever, you can learn many skills depending on where your job is. So again, don't shortchange yourself. You should be willing to brag about yourself, put yourself out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just because it's a retail job doesn't mean that doesn't translate for accounting experience. There's skills in there that you're learning that can evolve into working on a team in accounting or whatever those skills may be. Go to your career services. They can help you with that.
I think that's the one we see that students try and leave off the most, is that they don't think the part-time work that they might be doing either during the school year or over the summer counts in a way, as actual experience. So it's great to see that you guys are actually looking at that. Definitely something in there. So we had a question come through. What is the goal of recruiters at the fair? Is it only just to find people for internships or jobs, or is it also about making contacts?
I think it's about both. I think that, we're looking at the overall talent pool that is out there and assessing that. And even if it's something that, if we're only hiring for so many jobs now, then we definitely want to stay in contact with these people so that down the road, maybe there's an opportunity with them. So no, I think it's definitely networking for, a long term even.
Oh, I think so too, absolutely. And in banking in particular, we have not done a very good job of recruiting younger talent, and now it occurs to us that we're all old and thinking about retirement in the next 5 to 10 years, and so we need younger people to come in and replace us. And so I think definitely making the connections is really for jobs, internships, and for the future.
Yeah, that's great. There was a follow-up question to this, which I think is interesting. So the student wants to know how you express interest in a company, even if you feel like you're not quite ready for the job or the internship that they have presented at the time.
You're not wasting, it says like, if you're wasting our time, you're not wasting our time. If you're not qualified now, but you will be next year, I know freshmen come up, they get nervous that they shouldn't be coming up to us because they're not eligible for an internship yet. That's okay. We want to get you in our pipeline. We want to meet you. And then when we see you, when you are eligible, you've already started gaining those relationships and networking skills. So I think you're not wasting your time or our time.
Oh, not at all. Because in fact, if you start making connections earlier, like we talked about, then when it comes time, when I'm reviewing resumes for internships and jobs, I'm going to oh, I think I met this person. And I might remember having met you in our interaction. And that's going to literally put you more towards the top of the list than other people.
That's awesome. Yeah. Thank you for that question from our audience there. That's definitely a good one. Well, alrighty, guys. So we are at time now, and I really appreciate Terry, Allie, and Katie for you taking your time on a Friday to come and chat with us for this hour. Again, guys, remember you can reach out to us. We have our contact information up here if you have follow-up questions past this. We're also recording this webinar, so it will be sent out to all of your friends. So if they weren't able to make it, feel free to spread the rounds of this great webinar. So thank you all so much, and hopefully we will be seeing you in T-1 week. So fair is coming up. Thank you guys for all coming. Terry, Allie, and Katie, we really appreciate it.
All right, best wishes, everyone.
Have a great weekend.
Yeah, good luck, everybody. Bye.